Yo, what is up, guys? I'm bringing you a brand new video, and today we're talking about the Succession Berserker changes that happened in the patch note today. A lot of you guys have been asking me on my stream about my thoughts on what happened to Berserker and what are the buffs, what are the nerfs, and how are they going to affect the class in both capped content as well as uncapped content. I'm going to take you through all the different buffs and nerfs and what they essentially mean for the class and give you my opinion, and I'm going to try to do it in the most concise manner here. So we're going to start off by splitting this video into a few little sections. Let's start off by talking about all the different changes to the actual class itself, and then I'll go one by one in the categories of the changes and talk about what they mean for the class. So starting out, here are the main changes that happened to the class. We ended up losing our active healing abilities, period. We used to have 5 separate abilities that used to heal us 350 HP every 1 second, and we typically were using 4 of those out of combat and 1 of those while in combat, and those now no longer heal you, so our ability to get out of a fight and then back into a fight is slowed due to the fact that our HP pool does not come back nearly as quickly. The other change that we got is stamina locks on 4 of our abilities, both Lava Piercers, on Time to Rock, as well as Predatory Hunt, and a lot of people were rejoicing saying, hey, no more Berserker running around like a crazy dog, but ultimately we will talk about that a little bit later, but those stam locks really were not as big of a consequence as people thought that they were going to be. The other change that we got is healing related to our passives. So all classes lost percent healing, and so did the passive on Berserker. It used to heal 2% of your health every 2 seconds, and now it heals 600 HP flat every 5, or if you're E-buffed, it'll heal you 900 HP every 5 seconds instead. As well as there is a one-time heal when you pop the buff of 1500 HP if you're not in beast form, or it's closer to 4500 I think if you are in already beast form. So those are the major changes to healing as well as stamina. The other changes is that we got super armor on 2 separate abilities. So this heal is no longer a heal, but it is now a super armor stiffen into a knockdown. However, it's not even really worth talking about. You'll never use the ability. It's uncancelable. The stiffen does not last longer than it needs to, as long as it needs to, until the knockdown occurs. It's just a nothing ability, so pretty much pointless. The other thing, and the only nice thing, is that Time to Rock used to be a frontal guard. It's now a super armor. It was very, very unreliable frontal guard, and now it's more reliable as a super armor, but we do lose our ability to disengage from a fight as safely because we can't tank with our frontal guard when disengaging. So it's a little bit of a nerf, but mostly a buff to that ability. And then the biggest thing is that our Shift Q cooldown is now on a 20-second cooldown rather than a 45-second cooldown. This is a very integral ability that people use all the time. It is our ultimate ability as well, and it is a huge, huge buff to see that it's at 20 seconds rather than 45. And that is essentially the major changes that happen to the class in its completeness. So let's talk about the ramifications of what it means to have these changes occur. And we're going to start off with the stamina because it's the thing that most people are interested about. So previously, Berserker used to be able to run around like crazy, never worry about stamina, never look at its stamina bar. It was always a meme that you just hid the stamina bar because it didn't matter. That doesn't really change with those stamina locks. So Predatory Hunt is an ability that stam locks, right? Lava Piercer stam locks, Lava Piercer stam locks, and then you've got Time to Rock that stam locks. And then if you Lava Piercer as well as Predatory Hunt, you'll notice that stamina doesn't move. But stamina does still regenerate during lots of abilities. So you can still regenerate stam in your Devastation, in your Quaking Fury, in your Shift Q, in the flow to the Shift Q. You can even regenerate it in your spin. So there's a lot of options for us to use SA to regenerate stamina, and it ultimately doesn't really change a whole lot about our ability to chase other people either. So I have 94 stam right now, and I'm going to pretty much just make myself a nice little loop around the battle arena here. And you'll notice that I am using abilities that do take stamina, but by the time I make a full loop, I still had 55 stamina left. So you can do 2 entire loops around the outskirts of the battle arena before you lose your stam, which is pretty much uncatchable for most situations. And then if you pair that with actually how you would normally play, let's say that you go in to a scenario with half your stamina. So I'm going to go into the fight. I've got 46 stam. I'm going to Predatory. I'm going to Ancient Wave. I'm going to spin on somebody. I'm then going to use Devastation. I'll Ancient Wave again. I might go in and do Beastly Wind Slash, Shift Q, iframe again, Lava Piercer, Predatory Hunt in, iframe, and then get out. And I gained 10 stamina. So I did all those things. I moved around in all that way. I used all my abilities, and I gained stamina. So for most purposes, you're really not going to notice your stamina. I did a bunch of Solaire games here today, and I basically went down to 0 stamina one time, and that was after I did 3 loops around a map at the end of the round to try and get some BSR. So it really didn't do like anything to the class's stamina because we don't use stamina. We only use stamina on lava or on our shake off and our WF, and that's something that you don't necessarily need to spam, because if you really want to go in a straight line forever, we have options of just going and doing something like this, and we don't use stamina at all. In fact, we regenerate stamina by doing this, so we can keep up with our movement and never have to use stamina, like, ever. So it doesn't have any real consequence at all to the class in really any way. It's maybe a little slower than it used to be because you can't spam this as much. So that doesn't really matter. Other things that got changed, obviously the healing. So the healing is a thing. You can't heal up and get out of combat, and get back into the fight as quickly. I think I mentioned that. But the healing on the passive itself, in some scenarios, it actually is buffed compared to what it used to be. So it used to be 2% of your HP pool every 2 seconds. And normal HP pools used to be around 10,000, which means that it was healing 200 HP every 2 seconds. Now your HP pool is closer to like 13,000, and you're healing 600 HP every 5 seconds. So it's pretty much the same passive, just slower tick rate in 13,000 HP scenarios. But if you were to have only 10,000 HP or 11,000 HP in Tier 2 Node Wars, or 8,000 in Tier 1 Node Wars, it's actually a buff because your HP pool is ticking up quicker than it used to. And especially in Arena Solaire, it's a buff because your HP is ticking up in a much better way than it used to be because your HP pool is only about 7,700. So it is Arena Solaire buff, and it's a cap Node War buff, but it is an uncapped wash, essentially. Not any change, really. The E buff, though, did get nerfed. That one used to be 1%, 1 second, 2.5% of your HP every 1 second. So that's noticeable, but ultimately not that big of a deal. So the healing passive for most cases is buffed. Now, the major thing that is really the thing that people are really harping on to say that the Berserker is massively buffed is actually the Shift Q ability, getting a 20-second cooldown rather than 45. So this ability itself used to be a 45-second cooldown, and the reason that that was sort of important was because it gives 40 DP every 20 seconds when you use this skill. Now it has a 20-second cooldown. So that means 100% uptime on this ability, and the add-on also gives you 20 DP for 25 seconds, which means that you pretty much get to free up an add-on slot because now you can have 100% uptime by only having the DP on just this ability. So we basically gained quite a bit of DP permanently and an add-on slot by this ability now having a 20-second cooldown, plus the functionality of having a large AoE stun that is now on a halved cooldown. So that was a pretty nice buff. And then the time to rock being a super armor, this was a really, really unreliable frontal guard. So now that it is a lot more reliable to use, it's going to create a lot more scenario for us to be able to use it in larger scale PvP. So yeah, those are the major changes. Um, the one thing that I will point out about that 40 DP is that it's not like we only ever had that 40 DP half the time. We do have Weakling Hunt, which gave us 30 DP for 10 seconds, which is only on a 5-second cooldown. So effectively, we did gain 10 DR permanently rather than just gaining, um, the full 40, because we did have other abilities that could replace it. But those are the major things that occurred. Now, the other change that does affect Berserker in a positive light compared to a lot of classes is the change to HP potions in general. So HP potions now recover 550 HP rather than 275. It does not have the 45% additional HP regeneration while immobilized, but this is going to help us get our HP back naturally as well as out of combat much quicker, and that typically does benefit tankier classes much more than squishier classes. And that is especially important in a place like Arena of Solaire, where your HP is already reduced upon abilities but not reduced upon HP potions. So Zerker already being a tankier class in AOS and it just everywhere else, this is actually a pretty solidly noticeable buff just having the HP potions being better, because the class's HP bar is already harder to move downwards, and now it's moving upwards even more aggressively because of these. So, all in all, Zerker certainly did get a buff. These buffs are most noticeable in Arena Solaire and in capped content, and they're going to be less noticeable in uncapped content, other than the fact that your shift Q is now giving you an additional 10 DR that you otherwise wouldn't have had, as well as the add-on slot, freeing up the add-on slot, and then of course the functionality of the large AoE stun on a 20-second rather than 45-second cooldown. And the out of combat healing, it will be missed, but because of the HP potions, not that big a deal. And the stamina, not that big a deal. So those are pretty much the main summary of the big changes. Zerker overall got buffed. Now let's talk about what they should have done to the class. I think that those stamina changes that they made were to nerf it. And I think that the healing changes that they made were to nerf it. And I think that they just nerfed the class in the wrong way. I think that the time to rock change was great because of how unreliable the frontal guard was. They probably should have done that regardless. And that does have a downside of not having a frontal guard for a disengage. But the main problem with how they change this class is that the major issue that a lot of people had with Zerker is that it is extremely tanky even while on the floor. And by making the class have a mostly better healing passive, which works on the floor, as well as more DR from Shift Q, which works on the floor, it basically makes the class even harder to kill while it's on the floor. I would have rather them take an approach of nerfing those passive healing and DR moments while you're CC'd by essentially giving it sort of like the striker or warrior type treatment where you have additional tankiness in super armors, but the moment you get CC'd, that tankiness disappears and you are now left with just no more additional tankinesses that are making your HP really hard to bring down to 0 for your opponents, right? So they sort of messed that one up a bit. The other thing that is glaringly a problem about the class is that the 200% is like the only useful thing, only useful 200% that there is, and that's pretty silly. The fact that that resets in AOS all the time is very silly. That should be nerfed. Not being able to V out of a grab is such a problem, and just in general, I think that being able to grab out of like Lava Piercer as well is kind of a problem too. You it used to be where you could Lava Piercer and hit E, and that was your only grab, but now you can Lava Piercer and Shift E, and you typically weren't able to do that until they added this as a hotkeyable ability. It used to be only a hotkey ability, and now it's actually a key combination ability, which allows it to be used at a Lava Piercer. So that was like a buff that I don't know if they intended for. So the main things that I would have nerfed on the class, I don't think that the stamina locks are terrible. I think that this was a big W. I think that the shift Q change was a big W. I really liked what they did with the class, but they unintentionally buffed it, and here's how I would suggest like nerfing it going forward. Make it where you cannot use Shifty at a Lava Piercer. Just get rid of that. Don't need it. Frame 1 grab at a Lava Piercer, not required. Second thing they need to do to nerf it, nerf the 200%, make it where people can V out of the grab. That's got to happen. And then tone down the extra DR that you get just for using abilities that just for free that makes you tanky on the ground, and give the class additional tankiness while it's using SAs. If that's truly what you want for a melee class, is for it to be tanky while it's using SA and able to survive, which makes sense to me. Make it survive while it's on its feet, not when it's on the ground. Make mistakes punishable, because in a lot of scenarios, mistakes are not punishable on this class. So those are the main things that I think are important to nerf about it. And I also think that, I mean, you could start giving it some stamina problems. Like, you could actually start adding stamina costs to certain abilities to reduce the movement down. But I think that as a concept is very unfun, and I would rather see stamina be used as a resource for iframes rather than stamina used as a resource for just movement on most classes. So I would rather every other class get buffed in the way that if you are moving without using an iframe, you shouldn't be taxed on your stamina nearly as harshly. But if you are constantly iframing, like you're a Sork, you're like a Wusa, a lot of classes have a lot of different spammable iframes on many different skills, like Striker, for example, and Mystic, right? If your stamina bar should be a result of your ability to mitigate your damage completely or mitigate a CC completely. And by adding stamina costs to just general abilities, I think is a pretty unfun mechanic that I don't think should be added to Succession Berserker, but more so resolved for the other classes that have such an issue with it. That is the approach that I'd rather take to those types of nerfs. But yeah, I mean, all in all, Berserker did get buffs, and the class is better than it was, and it's better in good ways, but probably needs to be readdressed and hopefully consider the whole tankiness on the ground problem, having such a strong 200, having such a ridiculous grab, and the grab extension, and those would be the ways that I would go about looking at making the class weaker, given its strength in things like AOS. And then if you want its large-scale capability to be a bit better, then that's when you start looking at giving it a little bit bonus SA reduction and using SAs, but then, of course, slashing the DR that you get for free on those other abilities. But that's basically it. This video has already gone long enough. If you guys did enjoy and you guys want to have a little discussion in the comments of this video, feel free to leave a comment. I will read through them all. And I appreciate you guys very much for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Peace.